Hello and welcome to the show. For today's Forza 7 challenge, we're going to do a battle of the builds. The way this works, we'd pick a class, in this case, A class, and drivers could choose to build their cars to as high or as low in that class as they would like. You could be 1 PI into A class, or you could max the PI out. The grid, though, would be sorted in reverse performance order, so the slowest cars would be at the front, and there would be a 1 second roll-off delay between each vehicle. Now, between two cars, 1 second isn't a huge gap, but over the entire field, the pole sitter will have a roughly 20-second head start over the car at the back. That's a sizable difference. That is a sizable difference indeed, and of course, the further back you are, the more cars you have to overtake, the more traffic you have to get past, and the more potential there is for you to get into trouble. But, and this is of course the big but, the cars further back are going to be faster. Our first race was at the Sonoma Short Circuit. Our pole sitter, the Chevrolet Bel Air, was 1 PI into A class. The Aerial Nomad that set off second, that was again another low PI car, I think about 11 or so points into A class. We had a lot of cars going for mid PI, me included, for around the 650, 660 area. There was a big cluster of vehicles. The start of this race, the Bel Air had got off the line pretty well. The Nomad, very, very quick accelerating car. These Nomads can be fairly fast cars around the course of a lap somewhere. Not the easiest vehicles to drive. I mean, it's made up that 1 second head start very, very quickly. It's trying to get alongside the Bel Air as we head into the S's. But the Bel Air wasn't slow accelerating. It did have some decent top speed about it itself. The Nomad's a little bit sketchy around these high-speed Sonoma corners. I mean, this layout of Sonoma is very, very corner-intensive. It's very corner-intensive indeed. I was driving a Nissan R380, a car that I hadn't really driven before, but was hoping to make the most of. As I said, I was around roughly mid-A class, and I was about halfway down the grid. Made a flying start in the car. The Audi was struggling for pace. I would, well, both me and the 370Z would seize the opportunity to get past him, and the 370 wouldn't stand much chance against the acceleration of my car. I didn't have a huge amount of power, but I think it was under 1,500 pounds, this Nissan. It is mighty fast, accelerating, and could carry some pretty damn good corner speed, which meant that I could get some passes done early on, and you needed to get overtakes done quickly. In a race like this, you couldn't afford to be held up for too long. Get stuck in battles and you'll cost yourself a huge amount of time, and you will simply run out of time to make your way up through the order. You can already see the gaps going on at the front, the gap I had to try and catch up to the Maserati. Now, along with there being a car in this field that was just 1 PI into A class, there were a few vehicles that were max PI, full PI. Now, the downside with having sort of 3 or 4 different cars running at full PI is the game is still going to sort them, and you could end up having sort of a 2 or 3 second head start over a car with identical PI. In this case, it was the Nismo GTR that would be at the back of this group, having lost, well, kind of lost out a little bit on the start. Yeah, you don't want to end up having to lose out some of the other vehicles around here, but that's the risk you take. It's kind of where the tactics come in, as to how you choose your car, how you build your car, and so on. I think this whole group of 4 cars, while the 370Z would clonk a wall and suffer damage and fall back, would all be max PI. The Myers Manx having a look, trying to find a way past the Civic, the 2CV, wiggling around 2CV, mad acceleration, but not quite the control of some of these other cars. The Manx getting in trouble across the grass. The Honda would eventually get the move done on the Civic. However, there is always a risk when you go for these faster cars. You start further down the order of crashes, of accidents, of incidents causing problems. Up ahead, an Audi would get all out of shape and clonk a tyre bundle. Civic had nowhere to go. The Manx involved as well. And that would take out a number of the high PI cars. It's the risk you take starting further back in the pack. Gosh, nobody wants to crash, but it can happen. And sure enough, that would take out a couple of cars at the front, and it was the Gasser that continued to lead. The Aerial Nomad was struggling a little bit for pace as the field now started to Constantina up. The Datsun, very quick through the corners, seriously struggling in terms of power, and it was, again, another car fairly low down on the PI spectrum. The Mustang here making his way up through the pack, tries to get to the inside of the Porsche as they leave these first couple of corners. As I said, though, you cannot afford to get stuck in battles for too long. It can cost you a huge amount of time here. The Porsche still sat in front of that Mustang. The Ford eventually having a look up the inside, but he can't really get it cleanly done. Now the Ferrari is coming to join in. Maserati's catching this group. My Nissan is howling its way up to the back of this group, and still the Mustang can't get clear of the Porsche. Up ahead, the Nomad is battling with an RX-7. The Ariel managed to find a little bit of composure for a few corners. The Mustang finally got his way past the Porsche. Now, I was at the tail of this group, and again, keen to try and make my way through. The Datsun got in a little bit of trouble with 3 wide through the S's. That is not normal for cars who make it all through there. The Porsche is in trouble now, having been slowed through one corner, being passed by the Mustang. The Maserati gets to the inside. I get a better run than all of them. It's almost 4 wide as we dive down into the hairpin. The Datsun has a big dive, misjudges it though, clips the tyre bundle, and would lose the ground that he had tried to gain. I was the big winner in all of that as the Maserati fought with the Porsche. I could sneak up the inside and get all of them. Good news for my Nissan. I'd got 3 cars and not really cost myself very much time whatsoever. Amazingly, the Bel Air Gasser continued to lead. Again, this car, 1 PI into A-Class. And while the RX-7 was gradually closing on it, and, you know, the RX-7 wasn't massively high, I think it was about 25 sort of points into A-Class, the Gasser continued to lead this race. It was setting impressive amounts of speed for a car that you wouldn't expect a Gasser to be particularly good at circuit racing regardless, let alone when it is so low down compared to some of the other vehicles. Now, for the higher PI cars, they were having troubles. Not only had a couple been heavily damaged in a crash, others were stuck in traffic. This M3 was a quick car, but unable to find a way past the Volvo, and not being helped by the fact that another high PI car, the Ferrari here, was busy trying to find a way past him. You get stuck in these little groups, you'll cost yourself a couple of seconds a lap, and if you're going to try and get towards the front of the field, you need to be running seconds a lap faster than the leaders. And yeah, the BMW could not find a way past a Volvo, and every time it looked like there might be an opportunity, the Ferrari was there ready. This group aren't really helping themselves in matters. The Volvo perhaps not losing too much time at the front of this train. Again, that's the downside. You can have the faster car, but if you get stuck in traffic, you can't use said faster car. My Nissan was continuing to hunt its way through the pack. The Nomad was proving a little bit too difficult to keep under control around this circuit. The superior handling and massive acceleration of my Nissan was right behind, and I could just throw it up the inside. Nomad not really got an answer for the grip of their classic race car. The Mustang and Ferrari were now starting to fight. The Mustang, the lower PI car of the two, but was doing a good job of fending off that 250. It was my turn to get a lot of speed through the S. I think the Ferrari might have been a little bit compromised out of one corner, and that's all the opportunity I need in this mighty quick car as we head around a very, very fast turn. It's difficult to get passes done there, but if you can get the setup correct down towards the hairpin, this is your best bet for overtaking at Sonoma. Up the inside into the final hairpin. Get the car composed. A little bit slow at the exit from me, but I get past. Maserati now also goes and passes that Nomad. This track is a tough circuit to overtake, a very, very tough circuit to overtake on. So the higher PI cars were always a little bit more up against it around here. However, I was finding ways of making it work in the Nissan. And of all of the sort of higher PI cars, even like the mid-A class cars, I was making the best progress. I was able to get the overtakes done quickly and wasn't getting snared down in traffic as the BMW continued to be. The Volvo had now caught up to the Porsche. These cars that had started towards the front of the grid, you know, the Nomad, the Datsun, the Porsche, were now starting to fall through the pack. And as soon as you start getting embroiled in these battles, one car would find a way past, then a whole train of them would get through. The BMW finally gets an opportunity to get a move done on the Volvo, with the Volvo busy trying to get past that Porsche, ended up leaving a little bit of gap on the inside. The M3 would come flying through, finally get the pass completed. That Porsche lost 3 places in the hairpin. That's what could happen when one of these little groups of fast cars would catch up to the vehicles. And now the Porsche under a lot of threat from a very, very sideways Hemi Cuda in all of that. The Datsun was up next on the target list for these cars. The Volvo nearly managing to fight back against the BMW. The M3 very quick in a straight line, struggling a little bit more through these corners, but the Volvo unable to make the pass stick there. At the front, the RX-7 had finally caught up to the Gasser, but was having a very tough time making a pass stick. Meanwhile, I would go around the outside of the Mustang with the superior acceleration of the Nissan, get that pass completed up into third. Yeah, the Gasser was very quick, accelerating against these lower PI cars that had kind of started around it, had been able to catch it. It was able to out-accelerate them out of every corner, and as quick as the Mazda was through these turns, it was having a tough time, and it took the Mazda a few laps. And of course, as soon as these guys start fighting, they slow themselves down even more. And with my Nissan finally in some clean air, it wasn't long before I would join this foray. The RX-7 finally gets his opportunity up the inside into the final corner. Now, I'd seen over the course of a couple of laps the kind of amount the Mazda had been held up by the Gasser, just being unable to get clear of the car. And I knew if I had any chance to take victory here, I needed to clear the Chevrolet, and clear the Chevrolet pretty damn fast. Thankfully for me, my Nissan could go around just about any car in any corner. It was seeming like up through turn 1, around the outside or the inside for turn 2, and it would be a fairly straightforward pass. Always scary going alongside a car like the Gasser, but in the end, I just had so much more grip. I could get the move completed. And the RX-7 hadn't been able to get too far away. This very much was my opportunity with only a couple more laps to go. Get a good drive down this short straight. The acceleration of the Nissan was too much for that RX-7 to really deal with. The Mazda will go very defensive. I've got the grip to go for the cutback. We'll be side by side down towards the S's. The RX-7 knows he has only got a couple of laps to hold on if he can keep me behind, if he can keep slowing the Nissan down, but in the end, the R380 is just too good through the corners. Side by side through the S's is, not the easiest place to get passes done, and I think that was almost me making an overtake on just about every single different corner I could around this circuit. That's how good the Nissan was around this track. I was a little bit slow on the exit. The Mazda gets an opportunity, but I'm going to cover the inside down towards the hairpin. I mean, in that fight, you see I've got up to the lead, but you can see how much it slowed us down. The Gasser's right back in it. The Mustang tries to get to the inside of the Chevy, is a little bit too much on the inside of the hairpin, clonks the tyre bundle, would lose some ground in all of that. You can see how much, being in a battle only for half a lap between me and the Mazda there, how much that can potentially slow you down. But I was into the lead and was able to pull a little bit of a gap. Now, we talked about these guys, the Nomads, the Datsun, and so on. They did struggle in the later stages of the race. They just couldn't quite keep up. The head start that they had enjoyed early on had not been enough for them. They just lacked that little bit of speed, and in the end, the Nomad had brief moments of being very quick, but it was quite difficult to drive. Eventually falling back through the field, the Nismo GTR would work his way past the Nomad there fairly straightforward. And then you get Datsun behind, Porsche behind that group as well. These low PI cars hadn't really quite worked. The head start had not been enough for them as they had fell through the order. At the front, my Nissan would manage to pull a little bit of a safety margin on the final lap. It was a massively quick car around this track. The Mazda was in second. And again, bear in mind, the Mazda was only just, about 520 odd PI. So still a low PI car in A-Class. The Bel Air in third had remained close to the RX-7 for the first half of this final lap, but was a little bit wild through the S's and came under a lot of threat from the Mustang as we headed into these final few corners. The Gasser even gets a bit of a wobble through that high-speed turn. It's just 2 more turns to go. Gasser on the inside, your preferred defending line, but he can't pull it up in time. The Mustang is going to go for the cutback, kind of blocks the Gasser's run. The Gasser's acceleration is very good, but he had nowhere to go with all of that. The Mustang would manage to just about out-drag the Chevrolet to the line. It's a shame for the Gasser. It was a brilliant drive. I mean, to hold on to fourth was brilliant for a car just into A-Class. Helped by a lot of vehicles further back getting stuck in traffic and so on, but still has a fantastic drive. Shame he could have held onto a podium, but still, fourth place, very, very good going. The M3 would work his way up into a sixth place in all of that. But, the lower PI cars did pretty well on the most part. A couple struggled a bit more, but on the most part, they did very well at Sonoma. Now, a second race would go to a completely different circuit. Sonoma had been a very tough track to overtake on and very, very corner intensive, and we reckon that's probably why the lower PI cars did fairly well. They started out front could stay out of trouble, and being difficult to overtake on, the faster cars got stuck in battles between themselves and just couldn't work their way up through the pack fast enough. However, here at Silverstone, that is a different story. Much more corners in terms of better overtaking opportunities, longer straights, and yeah, just an easier track to get passes done. The initial lap is a little bit more spread out, actually, than we saw at Sonoma. In Sonoma, kind of 2 or 3 corners and cars could have bunched up together, even with the 1 second head start. The Datsun got himself in trouble, wheel on the grass, and that is not where you want to be on the opening lap and would lose 3 places. However, the rest of the pack would remain spread out a little bit more. It didn't quite concertina up as quickly as it had at Sonoma. The Audi continued to struggle a little bit for pace around here. My Nissan that had been so brilliantly fast at Sonoma was not quite such a fan of this Silverstone circuit. I had the initial acceleration, but top speed was lacking in my car, and the understeer was a little bit more showing at this circuit, oddly, than at Sonoma. Ahead of me, the 370Z would make a move on the Audi. Both cars a little bit slow off of the corner. That's the opportunity that I need to draw alongside the Audi. And again, get a pass done without costing me too much time. Now, you needed to get these done. You need to get the passes done cleanly, of course, because any collisions can cost you huge amounts. But wanted to get the passes done quickly. My Nissan would be up a place. The Audi losing another one to the Hemi Cuda, and the BMW was catching this group as well as we came down to the along the back straight. This was, yeah, one of the areas my Nissan wasn't slow down the straight, but it wasn't anywhere near as quick as some of the other cars. As I said, Silverstone circuit, a better track for overtaking, and this helps the higher PI cars. They get stuck in less battles. A Skyline up ahead spots a gap up the inside of a Volvo around a very fast final turn, and that would be a place for the Skyline. The Civic here, the only front-wheel drive car in the field, top A class though, was very quick through the corners. Not quite as fast as straight line as some, but yeah, very, very quick through the turns. The Skyline struggling a little bit with some of the corners, comes under fire from that Volvo slightly, but the Volvo's now got stuck in a battle. He's against cars that are faster than him and not being able to use his corner speed because of the Skyline up ahead, and that's not a situation you want to be in. The Civic will go side by side as we head down this first straight. The Silvia is getting things through the middle of this one. It's 3 wide onto the straight. It's going to be 3 wide by the time they get to the braking zone. It's the Honda with the corner grip, though, will get those positions. And the Volvo, yeah, having a bit of a tough time. It's just been caught by a group of fast cars, and as soon as one gets past, they all tend to get through. The Silvia ever so slightly tags the back of the Civic, although that front-wheel drive car just kind of booted, and it'll sort itself out, straighten itself up, and maintain all of that position. I was in a bit of trouble in the Nissan. I was not quite able to keep up with the 370Z, and while we were catching the cars towards the front, I was being caught quicker by the vehicles behind. The M3 in particular, massively fast down these straights and still pretty good through the turns. Much higher, I say much higher PI than my car. I think it was probably 20 or so PI higher than my Nissan, and as much as I fought it, there wasn't too much that I could do up towards Maggots and Beckett's. I just get out-dragged by the BMW and will have to sit back into line. And again, the problem is I've started fighting. As soon as you start fighting, you start taking defensive lines and so on. You slow yourself down. Cars behind that aren't having to do that are now getting involved. The Hemi Cuda is here to join in. The Skyline, with its monstrous amount of straight line speed, is coming as well. The only good news for me is up ahead was a Datsun that was having an even worse time of it than my Nissan. Skyline goes flying past on the outside. It's another almost 3 wide into a different corner. This time, me thinking the better part of trying to fit my car through the middle, especially up against cars that were seriously fast, and ending up carrying a bit too much mid-corner speed and understeering out wide. But yeah, not the track, not so much suiting my car, although with the Datsun bouncing its way across the curb and leaving a gap on the, well, the Hemi Cuda making a gap on the inside, I will happily follow through in all of that. I might have got a position, but lost 3 of them. And the Civic was also catching along with a very fast Silvia. Things were not quite going as well for me here whatsoever. The RX-7 that had come second at Sonoma, well, that was in trouble. It had been towards the front for a little while, but again, these whole kind of mugging trains would go on, and there wasn't too much the Mazda could do about it. It was fast enough through the corners, but down these straights, some of the much, much quicker cars would easily find ways past. You just weren't able to defend against sort of the superior performance as well here as you could at Sonoma. The BMW was long gone and already fighting off against the Nomad. The classic Grand Prix car, a handful through the corners, monstrous down the straights, was through, and the Skyline, well, that would just outdrag. That's a very narrow gap to put the car through, but the Skyline had so much speed that he could get that one done. Much like my Nissan had marched through the field at Sonoma, it was the M3 that was doing the marching here at Silverstone and being followed by the classic Skyline. M3 already up into a third place. The Bel Air still leading at this stage of the race. That Gasser did lead for a few laps out here, but it was always going to be a tall order to hold on to that. The Mustang going defensive against the BMW, but in the end, the Mustang doesn't have the grip of the BMW and will get outrun in a straight line. Overall, the BMW just that bit better car, and as much as the Ford tries to fend him off, it is not going to be enough. Mustang tries to go around the outside onto this first straight, but it isn't going to be able to work. That would put the BMW up into second place, and with a couple of laps to go, it wasn't that bigger a gap for him to try and chase down the Bel Air. Of course, while the Bel Air was a decent enough accelerating car, it could certainly fend off the lower PI cars. When you're coming up against a vehicle that is, about 570, 580 PI, that's a lot of difference in performance. And the Gasser doesn't have an answer. The BMW had closed the gap within a few corners as they head up towards the old turn one. The Gasser will go defensive, make it as difficult as he can for the BMW, but the M3 has got so much grip. It's a brilliant, brilliant pass around the outside there. They give each other just enough room. There's only a few millimetres between the cars, but the BMW is through. It's quicker than the Gasser in a straight line, quicker through the corners. The Chevy can't really do too much about that. As I said, with the higher PI cars, they were having an easier time making their way up through the field here. Some have still got a little bit more ensnared in battles. This Pontiac, for example, Trans Am, was, again, a top A-class car. Had got stuck in a little bit more traffic than some of the others. I think he actually started right at the very back of the field, so also had perhaps the biggest penalty in terms of a start. He was now picking off some of the other cars. It's 3 wide again. We were doing a lot of 3 wide in this racing, and that is a scary thing to behold. The Sylvia are able to maintain his position there. This was shaping up to be a really good battle. Unfortunately for the poor 370Z, that would lag out. That particular corner, the Firebird managing to get that position. The Sylvia almost out across the curve, a little bit sideways. The classic Grand Prix car had lots of straight line speed, but that was a real handful through the corners. My Nissan, I got tagged at one point, took a little bit of a trip across the grass, lost a few places. Honestly, though, I don't think it actually made much difference to the overall outcome for me, because I was struggling for pace massively at this circuit. The Gasser, well, that had fallen to 4th place. The Skyline was off chasing the BMW. The Mustang was still doing a very good job, actually, in 3rd. Unlike at Sonoma, the Gasser just couldn't hold on to its positions as we came into these closing stages. The Maserati was able to get the pass done. It's a little bit of an awkward place to get passes done, but it's a good pass from the Maserati. And now as we head down this back straight, some very fast cars, some very high PI cars were coming. The Hemi Cuda is to the inside of the Gasser. The Civic, with all of its grip, was able to carry so much speed and change direction through these corners so well to get the pass completed on the Gasser. It was around the outside for the next part. That's no real problem for that Civic. The Gasser is now down 3 places in the space of about a third of the lap. Now the Nismo is having a look up the inside down the old start-finish straight. That car is just about going to be able to draw alongside. The Sylvia is flying up towards the back of the Gasser as well. Once kind of that train has got to you of higher PI cars, you are in trouble. Once one of them gets through, just the whole lot come streaming past, and the Gasser couldn't quite repeat the same epicness from race 1 as it plummeted down through the positions. Still did well to hold on as high up for as long as it did. At the very front, the BMW might have marched through the field impressively, but the Skyline had gone with it, and the Nissan was certainly putting the pressure on. Gets up the inside into the penultimate corner, but is wide through the final turn. A little bit of a laggy bump between the 2 cars around that final corner. The BMW, of course, not going to be giving this one up easily. This was as they headed on to the final lap here. The Skyline around the outside of turn 1 is out across the curve. There was a few millimetres in that. The BMW could have ended up turning himself on the front of the Skyline. Gets away with cutting across, but that Nissan has got a lot of speed. It might have gone wide through one turn, but that's only bought the BMW about a corner's worth of respite. His M3 was a very fast car in a straight line, but it was no match for that Skyline as they head down this straight once more. The Nissan superior straight line speed kind of dummies across in the background. Will get his car to the inside. Not only was the Skyline fast in a straight line, could also carry some decent corner speed around here. It's up the inside of the BMW, and the M3 fought valiantly, did get to the lead briefly, but it just couldn't fend off from that Skyline. Again, the M3 able to get his nose underneath, but doesn't have the acceleration to really fight too much with that Nissan. Third place, well, the Mustang was doing very well. In fact, across sort of the 2 rounds, the Mustang perhaps one of the more consistent cars in all of this, but he was coming under increased pressure from a Civic on the final lap. We're going to see once more a massive overtake around the outside. Yeah, for a front-wheel drive car, be able to carry that sort of speed around the outside to get clear of the Mustang, that's some seriously good going for the Civic. With the Civic, being a top A-class car, the Mustang fairly low in A-class. I think it's around 530 PI. So, we're talking about 70 PI difference between those two cars. Mustang's not going to be able to do anything in the sort of latter half or the ending half of that lap. At the front, the Skyline was still under a little bit of threat. The BMW really threw the car through the last few corners, trying to close back up, trying to do something about getting that victory, but it just wasn't quite quick enough. Has a look into the final turn once more. The Skyline struggling a little bit, but has got that acceleration as they head around the final corner. The M3 can't do anything about it, and it would be the Skyline that would go on to take victory. M3 have to settle for second, with the Civic back in third. The Mustang did very well, actually, for that lower PI to hold on to fourth through the length of that race. The Maserati would end up in fifth. I love these Battle of the Bills. There's such an interesting sort of race. It's quite different in regards, a normal race you have a lot. The field is closest on lap 1. Lap 1, lap 2 is when the field is closest. And even in a single make race, it's going to gradually get more and more spread out as the races go on. But with the way that the cars are built, with the way that the roll-off delay works and the grid and so on, the field in these races kind of concertinas up at different points, random points through the races and with different groups of cars and so on. It makes for a really exciting race throughout. And it's a huge amount of tactics in terms of what sort of vehicle you go for. My Nissan was probably the best car at Sonoma. I think I had one of the fastest laps there, even though I wasn't top of A-class. I was keeping up with some of the full A-class cars in terms of lap times even at Sonoma. The car works so well. Silverstone, not so much. I didn't have a particularly good race at Silverstone. And, yeah, the tactics of having to try and get through the field and how much time you lose stuck in traffic does make for a fascinating battle, and yeah, a huge amount of fun. That, though, is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.